And the title of his presentation is "A Nation Refuses to Forget." And it's an illustrated presentation on the power and purpose of memorializing the Hawaiian Kingdom, focusing on celebrations of its most significant holiday, La Kuʻokoʻa. And he's going to be speaking to you and La Kuʻokoʻa was very, very important to everyone in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And for almost 125 years, we had no idea what La Kuʻokoʻa was. And only recently, I remember 5 years ago, playing music down at Uncle's in Kalapana. And we found out about La Kuʻokoʻa, that it was a Hawaiian Independence Day, and we wanted to put on a La Kuʻokoʻa celebration. So we made the announcement every Wednesdays at Uncle's and so forth, and hoping that people were going to come and celebrate with us Hawaiian Kingdom holiday once they knew that it was our Independence Day. Well, there were 3 of us that showed up, and nobody else came, and it was very disappointing because people did not understand and realize the importance of that day. And this is why the Kanaka Council is having these educational seminars and conferences on these important days. Even though, and we did it over the weekend because we needed a 2-day stretch in order to do it. So we did it on the closest weekend for La Kuʻokoʻa, which is on the 28th. And because of that experience at Uncle's, and we tried to do it again the following year, and same results, even though we had plenty of people coming down to Uncle's every Wednesdays. We come down to Uncle's, we get about 1,000, sometimes 1,500 people come down to Uncle's. But nobody showed up when it came time for La Kuʻokoʻa. And I'm very happy to see all of you here so that we can continue to build and share this important holiday. And from that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ron Williams, and he is awesome, awesome presenter.
Aloha mai kākou. More energetic, eh? Aloha mai kākou. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. We're all awake still. Ovao Ron, Ron Williams Jr. Ko'inoa Piha. He kumu wau I ke kulunui o University of Hawaii Manoa I loko kulunui o Hawaii Nui a Kea. Yeah? My name is Ron Williams Jr. I'm not a teacher anymore. I resigned a couple weeks ago, but I was a teacher at the Center for Hawaiian Studies at UH Manoa for about 10 years. Recently, I worked at Native Hawaiian Student Services. Now I'm working at the Hawaii State Archives, but I'm working on my book and working on projects and things like that. To start off with my mo'okuauhau, my mother is Janet Marie LaBounty. Her people come from Chicago, Illinois, which is where I was born. I'm Malahini to this place. I was born in Chicago. My father comes from Arkansas, Ron Williams Sr. He comes from Arkansas, a long line of fishermen, hunters, things like that. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Arkansas, came out to California in about 1984. I went to Damien High School in Los Angeles, California. We had no idea who he was. I didn't learn who he was till I came out to Hawaii. But came out to Maui in 1996. My girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, who then became my ex-wife, was Hapai, and we didn't want to raise a kid in San Francisco, so we moved to where she has family on Lanai. So we came to Maui in 1996. My daughter was born, or 1997. My daughter was born in 1998. I have a 19-year-old daughter now. That's hard to believe that. But so I'm a father, I'm a historian, I'm a writer, and author. I went back to school at 35 years old. I was working at the luau in Lahaina, the Feast at Lele, having a wonderful time, making good money, and I realized I couldn't do it forever. So I went back to school at Maui Community College. My first kumu was Keopi Raymond. A little bit of language, a little bit of culture, things like that I was interested in. One day in class, he showed a film that changed my life. This was 2001. And he showed a film in class of one of the most passionate, brilliant people I've ever seen in my life. And I said, that's who I want to study under. And that was Dr. Haunani K. Trask. Dr. Trask was teaching at the Center for Hawaiian Studies, and I said, that's where I'm going to go. And people are like, are you crazy? And I said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go out to Manoa and study under Dr. Trask. Came out to Manoa in 2003, was incredibly warmly welcomed by Mehana Hind, who was the counselor there at the time, and Dr. Trask, and Dr. Kameit Lahiva, and Dr. Osorio. I got my bachelor's degree in Hawaiian Studies at Kuʻokoʻa. Oh, thank you. I graduated in 2005. I got my master's degree in Pacific Island Studies. So same type of thing, just a little broader, in 2008. In 2008, I went back to school and got for 5 years and got my PhD in the history of Hawaii. To give you a kind of a background on the history of Hawaii at UH never had a distinct PhD in Hawaiian history until about 7 or 8 years ago. You could get a degree in Southeast Asian history, American history, Korean history, but they had a degree in Pacific history and you could focus on Hawaii. About 7 or 8 years ago, they hired 2 professors, Dr. Noelani Arista and Dr. John Rosa, to start a program to award specifically PhDs in Hawaiian history. So now that's one of the paths that students can take. So now the university is finally coming around to that. So I got my PhD in 2013 and was teaching since 2005 at the Center for Hawaiian Studies, but became a faculty member there at 2010. So that's who I am. What I do is platform native voices in Hawaiian history. Most of you probably know something that I talk about in every talk I go to, and that is that about 95% about what's been published about Hawaii comes from English language sources only. About 95%. That means that if you see a library with 1,000 books in them, 950 of them come from English language sources only. Well, why is that a problem? Because the period we're talking about, the Hawaiian Kingdom, people wrote and spoke and published and argued and wrote bills in Hawaiian. So we left those voices behind. So for 100 years, for a century, we've heard about Hawaiians. And now we're starting to hear from Hawaiians. Because many people, myself and many, many others, are starting to go back in that Hawaiian language archive and say, wait a minute, what were Hawaiians saying about that? What were Hawaiians writing about that? And as Kau'i and Keanu both pointed out, we have 125,000 pages of Hawaiian language newspapers now. That's a lot of voice. It's a lot of voice. We also have, people focus on the newspapers a lot. We also have lots of other documents in Hawaiian. There are tens of thousands of letters, Maka'olelo Hawaii, in different collections around the Hawaii State Archives, Hawaiian Mission Children's Museum, Hawaiian Historical Society, and many others have letters in Hawaiian, back and forth to the Ali'i, back and forth to the Maka'ainana, and so forth. There's government documents in Hawaiian, all kinds of things. We have the interview tapes that Mrs. Pukui did for 30 years with Kupuna, Maka'olelo Hawaii. So the voice of the people, the voice of the nation is there. We just haven't listened to it. We've started to listen to it over the last 20 or 30 years, and it's changing the history that we know. Yeah? So what I'm going to talk about today is, these have been 2 beautiful talks before mine that really kind of set it up, because now we're going to talk about historical celebrations of La Kuokoa. What did they used to do, and how and when? And then I'll tie it hopefully to today's celebrations. And the main theme is this idea of not forgetting. My talks are usually kind of depressing. I talk all about how the history that's been lost and how it was lost. But today, we get to celebrate, yeah? Because 3 people, 5 people, 10 people, 50 people, we're remembering La Kuokoa, one of the most important holidays of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And we all get to go on and tell that story to more people, yeah? And I've seen it start to grow. So today's a day of celebration. Before I get into my PowerPoint talk, I want to show you a couple of slides and talk about a couple of stories that are related, but it's kind of the stuff the material that you can take out of here and continue to tell stories with, okay? And I don't want to forget it, so I'm going to start with it. That's a big thing for me as a teacher is talking to the students, and then they leave the class, and they remember 2 things you said. Well, what can they take out that means something to them? In the last 10 or 15 years, there's been some incredible research done by folks like Donovan Preza, Keanu Sai, myself, and others that have started to access documents that were either not looked at before or actually have recently become available. Yeah? People don't think of archives as living things. They are. They're animate. They continue to get things into the archives all the time. And one example just blows me away. The most kind of incredible example I've ever heard of happened about a year ago. And I'll share that story with you. I'm currently the president of the Hawaiian Historical Society. Our office is there with the Hawaiian Mission Children's Museum. If you know Kawaiaha'o Church, get Kawaiaha'o Lane right there, get the Mission Houses Museum. That's where all the missionary children and all their collection is. Well, the Hawaiian Historical Society is in there also. We lease a room from them. There was a woman that used to come in all the time named Maisie Sanford. And she was she was a missionary descendant, a Baldwin descendant. And she used to come in and hang out and talk story, and very nice woman. And she'd say, oh, I've got a lot of stuff up at my house you guys should come see. And I would say, oh yeah, whenever you're ready, invite us up. And she just kind of talked about it. I've got a lot of documents up at my house. And, okay. Well, finally, she kind of made it, okay, I'm ready. And so Tom Woods, who was the executive director of the Hawaiian Mission Children's Museum, said, okay, let's go see what you've got. He came back that afternoon and he looked at me and he said, oh my gosh, you have to see what this woman has. Maisie Sanford, we knew her as a Baldwin descendant. She's also a Smith descendant. A lot of the missionary families intermarried, right? She was the great-granddaughter of William Owen Smith. William Owen Smith was the Attorney General for the Provisional Government and the Republic, and a little bit during the territorial time. So he was handling all the legal documents, a lot of the legal documents around the overthrow and the Republic of Hawaii and supposed annexation and those things. And back in those days, a lot of folks like Judd and so forth, they would take their work home with them. And sometimes the documents would go, we didn't have an archive back then, right? So sometimes they were kept in the personal boxes and things like that. Well, William Owen Smith and the Provisional Government had all of these documents, these original documents. And they wanted to keep them safe because they were scared they were going to get overthrown, actually. And they wanted to keep these documents safe. And so they put them inside the Bishop Trust vault. Bishop Trust was the corporation, not the Bishop Estate Trust, but the Bishop Trust was what became Bank of Hawaii. Was it Bank of Hawaii or First Hawaiian? First Hawaiian, thank you. So they kept them in the Bishop Trust vault because it was the best vault in town. So those documents from the Provisional Government, primary source documents, original documents, were in the vault until 1925, when William Owen Smith's daughter, who now lives in Makawao, or lived in Haiku, wrote to Bishop Trust and said, I want my grandfather's stuff back. And instead of going through them and separating the personal from the legal, they just sent her everything. So these documents were at her house in Haiku until 1978, I believe. When she passed, they went to her daughter, who was Maisie Sanford. And so she kept them at her house in Manoa. Too much stuff to keep, 57 boxes. So she got a Home Depot shed and put it in her backyard, and she kept them in the Home Depot shed in her backyard. Well, within that Home Depot shed in her backyard were some of the most important documents in Hawaiian history. You're talking about things like declarations of independence and the equal of a constitution and so forth. And one of those documents, it's my favorite, is the original protest written by the Queen on January 17th, 1893. When the Queen sat down about 5:30, 6 o'clock p.m. on the evening of January 17th, and she had to make that decision about what to do, and she consulted with Marshall Wilson and her cabinet and so forth, and she decides brilliantly that, as Keanu explained, the best thing to do is file a formal protest. Don't fight. You're going to lose men, you're going to lose lives, and you have a chance of losing sovereignty. But instead, file a formal protest. And she wrote a document that I had memorized. I, Liliuokalani, by the grace of God, Queen, do hereby protest, and she goes on and on and on. I'd seen it 1,000 times. I'd read it in books, Gavin Dawes, Sholop's, all these books. I'd never thought, where's that original? It was in Auntie's backyard in Manoa. Yeah? Gavin Dawes, Kuikendall, all these guys never saw the original. They were going off what was printed in the newspapers about the document. That original document was in her yard. She came down and gave it to the Hawaiian Mission Houses Museum. That document, along with primary source documents from John Stevens, the American minister, and others, thousands of documents, just in the last 8 months, made it into the Hawaiian Mission Children's Museum. So the reason I'm telling you this is so that you'll get excited about archives and libraries, but also because I want to talk today about that kuleana of not forgetting. Yeah? Kauai told us a beautiful story, a story that it would be hard to forget. But the reason I ask the question is because, so what are we going to do tomorrow? Are we going to tell somebody tomorrow, our cousin, our nephew? Are we going to go to school next week and say to the 3rd grade teacher, hey, why don't you tell the story of Ha'olio? And she'll say, who's that? Say, oh, I can help you out. I can write something up and you can share it with the kids in class. Are we going to do that? How are we going to keep these stories alive? So some of the most primary important documents in Hawaiian history, I want to get out there to you so that you can help pass those stories on. That document, the Queen's original protest. Now, I want to make a point that the Hawaiian Mission Houses Museum is a private archive, which is different than a public archive. The Hawaii State Archives, which is your archives, the people's archives, is a public archive. It means anybody can walk in there and see anything in their collection from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. any day. You don't have to have money, you don't have to be anybody important. You can go in there and see anything they have. You can't go see the 50-foot flag, they can't pull it up for you, but under any basic document you can see. You don't have to pay for it. It's yours already, it's the public's. So if you want a copy of something, you have to pay the 25 cents or whatever to get it copied, but you don't have to pay to use it. If I'm, as a writer, I'm writing an article, and I want to put a picture of the Queen in there, if I go to Bishop Museum or if I go to the Hawaiian Mission Houses and I say, I want a picture of the Queen, I want to use it in this article, they're going to charge me $50 to publish that article, to use that picture, the rights to use that picture. If I go to the Hawaii State Archives, it's absolutely free because it's ours already, right? So I'm high on public archives. That being said, the Hawaiian Mission Houses Museum made the decision to digitize these documents and put them up for the public to see, which they didn't have to do. That's really cool. So I want to give you, I'm going to start by being dorky and give you the URL so that I want everybody who's got a pencil to write it down. You can access this document, the original written protest of the Queen. You can download it as a beautiful, huge color image. You can print it out. You can make a poster of it. You can put it in your school. You can put it in your home. You can demand that the coffee shop put it on their wall. You've got copies of this document. This is how stories get told. This is how stories get saved. This is how we stop forgetting. Yeah? So let me pull that up. Right here. Right there. Okay. So that's the URL. And if you happen to forget it, you can go to the HawaiianMissionHouses.org and you can search there in their digital collection. But this is the direct link right there. Okay? And I'm going to show it to you in just a second. But with that URL, you can access the letter your Queen wrote on January 17th, 1893. And let me show you what it looks like. I had a talk on the way over here with friends of mine about the difference between how my students Google and actually seeing a document. Whether you're spiritual or not, whether you're an atheist, no matter what you believe, there's a big difference between pulling this up online and showing you and you holding it in your hand, right? When I take my students into the state archives, they get to hold things in their hand that were written by the Queen, that were written by Joseph Navahi and so forth. There's mana in that palapala, yeah? That makes a difference. All of these documents at the state archives are accessible like that. So here's the Queen's letter. Received by the hands of the late cabinet this 17th day of January, AD 1893. Sanford B. Dole, Chairman and Executive of Council of Provisional Government. And here's the actual second page. Oops, third page. Okay, there it is. I, Liliuokalani, by the grace of God and under the Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom Queen, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain persons claiming to have established a provisional government of and for this kingdom. Yeah? That's the actual original that the Queen wrote, and it's available to you for free online. So my point is, print it out. Yeah? Show it to your kids. Show it to your friends. I don't know why that's not in every school in Hawaii. I don't know why that's not at the Queen Liliuokalani Center at UH Manoa. But it can be. So let's do that. That's keeping stories alive. So that's one. As Kau'i has, almost every historian, almost every researcher has a favorite subject. I've got 500 projects working, but for me, my guy is William Punahu Aveoveo Ulokalani White. William White, and I'll make the story really brief. William White was a senator from Lahaina, Maui. He was one of the three authors of the Queen's Constitution in 1893. He was the man on Maui that kind of looked out for the Queen and sent her messages about who was against her and who was for her. He was a member of Halinau'a, Kalakaaua's Halinau'a. He was a brilliant man. His grandfather was the first haole to settle in Lahaina, John White. He married a Hawaiian named Keawe, and William's mo'okuauhau comes from Molokai. He was a Hawaiian lawyer, a Hawaiian senator who gave his entire life to the nation and passed away and ended up in an unmarked grave. Through a stroke of I don't know, how things work. I met many of his great-grandchildren. Over the last 8 years, we put together material about him that was able to be published as an article. We had a fundraiser, raised funds, and actually placed a gravestone for him at his grave. So things like that, right, continue getting Hawaiian heroes, Hawaiian patriot heroes out there. Part of that project was to create these cards, right? Now the long-term project, my long-term idea is to create a whole set of these. Hawaiian patriot baseball cards, yeah? But not baseball, politics. Hawaiian patriot cards, and he's the first. William Punohu Aveoveo Liliuokalani White. He's marked at the top left there with the award the Queen gave him on January 14th, 1893. But about 2 hours before she's to walk out on the balcony of the Iolani Palace and proclaim to the crowd that is gathered that they have a new constitution, she met with William White and Joseph Navahi in the Blue Room of the palace and awarded them the Knight's Order of Kalakaua, the highest award in the kingdom. They were the last two men knighted in the Hawaiian kingdom. And now he has a burial marker and respect. His story is on here. The Queen called him one of the two great patriots of the nation, and his biography is on the back. I have these Makolelo Haole and Makolelo Hawaii. So they're in English and Hawaiian, and I hope that everybody will take at least one home. So when I'm done talking, and I'm telling you now because I'll forget, when I'm done talking, please come up and grab some of these and give them out to your friends and your students and so forth. The more we get these patriots known, not only William, but all of them, yeah? The more we start to keep these stories alive. I've also brought a flyer for the Hawaii State Archives, which tells you some of the programs they have going on, and a genealogy resource from the Hawaii State Archives. Okay? So that stuff's all up here for you guys. But now let's get down to business. The La Kuokoa, Mai Poina, a nation refuses to forget. So almost everybody's familiar with the story of the Queen handing out the yellow ribbons that said Mai Poina. Yeah? When she was arrested and put in and imprisoned in her own palace, she sent people home that visited her with these ribbons that said, "Don't forget." Yeah? And she wasn't just saying, "Don't forget me." She was saying, "Don't forget our story. Don't forget the nation. Don't forget the cause." Yeah? And people didn't. And the things that were thrown at them, the way this history was changed, an incredible avalanche of things were put up against the people, but they didn't forget. And so we're going to go now and look through kind of how they didn't forget, what they celebrated. We'll see that period when history was kind of pushed aside and why, and then look at the celebrations today. So, constructing a new national narrative. I don't usually like to read long things, but this is something I wrote that I think kind of makes it succinct, the argument I'm trying to make. So I want to talk about, this talks about why and how this thing was done. Constructing a new national narrative, 1893 to 1950. A national narrative was created for Hawaii that had its genesis in the need to dislodge a people from their unambiguous identity as Hawaiian nationals and have them view themselves as Americans. Immediately following the coup, a flood of textual sources cascaded from the presses, launching a concerted effort to link Hawaii to the United States in people's minds and concurrently displace identities of Hawaiian nationality. Yeah? Dr. John Osorio wrote an article called On Being Hawaiian in 2006. And he made a very controversial statement at the time in his article. He said, Dr. John said, we as Hawaiians today are worse off than Hawaiians were in 1893, having just lost their nation. And people are like, why? And he said, because at least they knew who they were. He said, he argues that a Hawaiian national of 1893 knew he was a Hawaiian national. There was no confusion about that at all. And he argues today, he says, we Hawaiians are confused about our identity. Some of us think we're Americans. So with all the modernity, with all the things that have gotten back, with all the resources, he says we're not as good off as we were then because at least we knew who we were. And that happened because of this flood of material. Published voices sought to highlight American connections, interests, and influence in Hawaii. Within the country, educational texts commissioned by the Board of Education and produced by people such as William DeWitt Alexander, an annexation commissioner to the United States, supported the narrative of Hawaii as an American place. International efforts to naturalize the idea were directed through the positioning of sympathetic voice as the Associated Press Honolulu correspondent to foreign papers. So the Department of Education in Hawaii in 1900 was putting out material changing the narrative about the past and creating a new future. This amazing monarchy, this amazing progressive nation that had been created by Hawaiians was being elided, was being covered up by the Board of Education and also the popular press. This narrative would later expand to take monumental form as one U.S. president or public icon after another, whether an image or name, began to dot the Hawaiian Islands landscape. In 1907, Honolulu High School on Oahu was renamed President William McKinley High in memoriam to the former U.S. leader. The next year, a U.S. military base named after Lieutenant General John Schofield was established on nearly 18,000 acres of land in Oahu. The decades that followed saw the erection of Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson, and Roosevelt schools on Hawaiian soil. All of these entities and many more claimed space, both on the physical landscape and in the minds of a new generation of Hawaiian youth. These young Hawaiian descendants of a nearly 2 millennia presence on the lands birthed by their ancestor, Papa Hanaumoku, would now memorize U.S. state capitals and lists of American presidents. A patriotic national narrative would be demanded during 2 world wars and later be powerfully amplified through the creation of a sobering U.S. war memorial at Pearl Harbor. Today, custodians of the memorial from the U.S. National Park Service offer a call to millions of visitors from the United States continent to travel to Pu'uloa, Oahu to experience your America. I'm writing an article currently about the recreation of the Pearl Harbor Museum. About 10 years ago, the museum, they spent $60 million reinterpreting Pearl Harbor, and they put it all together. They had community hearings, and I went with Dr. Osorio, with Dr. John, and it wasn't funny, it was horrific. We'd sit there and listen, and the whole idea was the National Park Service had taken over from the military, and they said, well, we're going to be much better stewards. We're not about the military, we're going to tell the real story. And we want to be more inclusive. We want to tell the inclusive story of the Pearl Harbor. And so what does that mean? It means they're going to tell a lot more Japanese stories. And so they said, yeah, we're going to be more inclusive. And Dr. John's like, well, what about Hawaiians? Well, yeah, well, I don't know. And that story didn't make it into the new $60 million. Well, in their eyes it did. You know, they put Kane and Wahine on the bathroom door, right? But the story of what happened there, the story of that place being a Hawaiian nation, that somber, and I have all due respect for the gentleman who died there. They lost their lives there. But this isn't America. And so how do people, this war memorial really gives this heavy narrative when you go there. And it links that place and Hawaii in general to the United States, right? You're going 7,000 miles from Maryland to come visit. And the National Park Service's motto at this time is Experience Your America. So they have all of the flyers, all of the handouts. When they come to Pearl Harbor, they say, come experience your America in Pu'uloa. That's how they do it. That's part of that big narrative, yeah? So that continues. So with that said, I'm going to give you some detailed examples in a bit. But let's look back and go back and see the beginnings of La Kuokoʻa and how that narrative started. And I'm going to tie La Kuokoʻa to kind of things going on in the nation, so you can get a feel for that. So La Kuokoʻa, 1843 to 2017. So all of this happened, yet Hawaiians remember, yeah? At least there's 3, right? Now there's 50. You all remember. You all are here today because of La Kuokoʻa. I don't think too many people accidentally wandered in, right? You're here because of La Kuokoʻa. So through everything, through all of the stuff I'm going to show you, you remembered, right? That comes from the kupuna. Anglo-French proclamation of the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent state. Keanu did a great job of explaining that. Kau'i followed it up with a really emotional story about the meat behind it, yeah? Anglo-French proclamation, November 28th, 1843. Kau'i Kiaoli, the Queen of England and the King of France. First non-European born nation to become sovereign, yeah? To gain their sovereignty. How many people know that? How many people outside of us know that? How many people in the United States, in America, know that? Does the average school kid in Nebraska, California, Texas, California, do they know what was the first non-European nation in the world outside of, in Oceania? Was Hawaii, right? November 28, 1847, so 4 years later, Kauikeoli asked his Minister of the Interior, our Foreign Minister, R.C. Wiley, to present a plan to the Privy Council on the mode of government celebrations of La Kuokoa. So it's been a national holiday for 4 years, or 3 years actually, but now they're trying to say, how should we celebrate? And Wiley writes him back and recommends a few things. Your Majesty's large standard to be hoisted at the palace or wherever your Majesty may pass that day from sunrise to sunset. So the royal standard is the marker for the monarch. The national flag is the king, is the nation. The royal standard marks where the king or queen is. When they're at home, it's over their house. When they're at the palace, it's over the palace. When they're traveling, it's over the boat, and so forth. When Kalakaua traveled around the world and visited 60 different nations and was the first monarch to circumnavigate the globe, his royal standard went with him. That royal standard, that actual one that traveled with him around the world, is at the Hawaii State Archives. 20 feet by 30 feet. We just took it out about 3 weeks ago and showed it at Kamehameha schools. And it's part of a project to take care of those flags better. So we had preservationists come out and tell us what we needed to do and so forth. So that flag is at the State Archives. But that flag would fly over, for Kauikeoli, his flag, would fly over his house when he's home, a ship when he's on it, and so forth. So fly that flag from dusk, from sunrise to sunset. The large national flag to be hoisted from sunrise to sunset on all forts within your Majesty's kingdom, and a royal salute of 21 guns to be fired from each fort exactly at 12 o'clock noon. Now I know on the 28th of this year, the folks on Maui who are getting this stuff together for La Kuokoa are going to do something around that. Lahaina used to be the capital. They're going to have something happen at noon. I don't know if they're raising the flag or something, but there's activities going around noon. These are all attempts to remember the past. They're not making it up. Looking at the past and saying, let's remember what they did. All national vessels in the ports of your Majesty's kingdom or at sea to hoist their flags that day from sunrise to sunset. And these tributes you read about, these activities you read in the papers, flags everywhere. Hawaiian kingdom flags around the nation. Yeah. Independence. So in 1862, and I'm not going to take up 2 hours, but I'll take an hour or so, but I only got some time, so I don't want to go through all of them, but I've picked out some that I think are kind of significant. But do know there were celebrations, large celebrations every year. La Kuokoa 1862. 1862 was also a very important time for the kingdom. Mo'i Alexander Liliuokalani was the king. The Mo'i and Mo'i Wahine used the occasion of the 28th anniversary of Hawaiian Independence Day to be confirmed into the Anglican Church. Now you say, well, what's the connection? So what? They were baptized and became Anglican. Well, it's important if you know the context of the Anglican Church and why it was brought here. There's been a little bit of talk about it, but it's been greatly underplayed. Alexander Liliuokalani and his wife brought the Anglican Church to Hawaii as a specific contestation of the American Protestant Church in Hawaii. By the 1860s, they started to say those American missionaries are being kind of pushy and haughty, and they're kind of getting into business now, and they're gaining some power in government and so forth. And so to push back against that, they brought the Anglican Church here. And we know this because of a bunch of things, but one in particular, Queen Emma. So the Anglican pastors are coming to Hawaii to baptize the prince. Alexander Liliuokalani and Queen Emma's son is about 4 or 5 years old, and he's going to be the first Anglican baptism in the kingdom. His godmother is the Queen of England. So the ship is about 10 days offshore, and the prince dies. And so when the ship arrives, the first baptism is actually the Queen. Queen Emma is baptized as the first Anglican baptism in the kingdom. But what she tells in her journals, what she tells the church to do now is very important. She tells these Anglican priests, I want you to incorporate as a corporation in the kingdom so that I can give you money and property so you can build schools and churches and so forth. And they do. They incorporate as the Reformed Catholic Church of Hawaii. It's eventually called the Anglican Church. But in 1862, they incorporate, and the first school they build, this shows you how this history just falls by the wayside and purposefully. The Iolani School it's not something they really talk about a lot or maybe don't know about, but the first Anglican school in Hawaii was not in Honolulu, it was in Lahaina. The Queen sets up a school in Lahaina called Luaehu, which is where the first Constitution was written, the Luaehu Constitution of 1840. The first school, Anglican school, is where Kamehameha III School is today on Front Street in Lahaina, on the beach there. And it was for Hawaiian British children to become future leaders of the kingdom. Sounds like a lot like another school just up the hill. The American Protestant school up at Lahaina Luna was turning out Hawaiians that those American Protestant missionaries wanted to be future leaders of the kingdom. And the Queen said, oh, that's fine, but we're doing this down here. And they're doing the same thing, but they're turning out leaders that are Anglican and don't have that American tie. Yeah? And another very important note, in Hawaiian studies and Hawaiian language and academia, sometimes we rush to tell these stories and then they get a lot more complicated. For the last 20 or 30 years, we've always talked about Hawaiian as the good language and English as the bad language. Not necessarily always true. In the 1860s, nobody thought Hawaiian was going to disappear. Learning English meant that you were bilingual. You're going to have your Hawaiian, but learning English meant that you were bilingual. The Queen insisted that all the students at Luaehu be taught through the medium of English language. And she did it on purpose, because those future leaders of the Hawaiian Kingdom were graduating with all the same things they're getting up there, but also English. So they were graduating with Latin, Greek, math, science, all this stuff, but being fluent in English also. The students at Lahaina Luna were being taught in Hawaiian. And it's a conjecture, no one's written a lot about it yet, but some folks say that was purposeful, that the American Protestant mission didn't want those Hawaiian scholars to be on the level playing field by having that tool of English also. But for whatever reason, the Queen insisted they be taught in English. So those students are down there. The nickname of that school down on the beach there in Lahaina was Lahaina Lalo. Yeah? Lahaina Luna, Lahaina Lalo. Yeah? So that was a purposeful move of the Queen. So they choose La Kuokoa 1862 to be confirmed in the Anglican Church. Very significant. So Friday, November 28th, the day kept annually as a public holiday in commemoration of the Declaration of Independence of the islands, is now made further memorable by confirmation of the King and Queen. Yeah? La Kuokoa 1873. Mo'i William Charles Lunalilo is king. I want to put context around all these celebrations. It's not just a one-day thing. They're doing something purposeful. They're coming together on those days to make a much larger statement. So around just before November 1873, there were rumors in town about a treaty of reciprocity between the Hawaiian Kingdom with the U.S. That sparked Halavai Maka'ainana, with Kanaka Maoli vehemently protesting the idea of offering pu'oloa to the U.S. So in July of 1873, word started to leak out that the king and his Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was, anybody know the minister? Charles Reed Bishop, is pushing a treaty of reciprocity with the United States. And so Hawaiians start having meetings and church meetings and so forth and say, no, because we don't give away property. We don't give away Hawaiian Kingdom property to another nation. We don't give up parts of our sovereignty, because part of the treaty was going to eventually talk about having that nation having the only rights to lease land in the kingdom. So the people said, no, absolutely not. Charles Reed Bishop writes a letter, actually, to his friends in Washington, D.C., and says, every Kanaka in the kingdom is against this idea, including my wife, Pauahi. So rumors are going around, people are starting to talk about it, so the government's finally forced to make a statement. So I think it's July 31st, 1873, the government paper comes out with a statement from Charles Reed Bishop, and he says, yes, we are considering talking about an exchange of taxes with the United States and a reciprocity treaty that might give away pu'oloa. And Charles Reed Bishop goes on for about a column and a half to talk about how we're not doing anything with that area anyway. It's not really that important anyway. Well, maybe not important to him. It was important to the Hawaiians that fished there, that lived there, that saw that as part of their nation. So when the government comes out and makes that statement, wildfire. There was a meeting at Kaumakapili Church with 400 Kanaka Maoli that stood up and shouted and said, no, we do not want this treaty. And they passed resolutions, including, so in Ko Hawaii Ponoi, July 2nd, 1873, they say, no ka ho'ike ana o na maka'ainana o ka apana o Honolulu nei, I ka kola ko aiole, I ka ho'olilo aku I ka ava o pu'oloa. I mea aia mai ai ke kui kahi panalike e America hui pu ia. Yeah, and I'll read it here in English. Whoops, I lost it. I didn't offer a translation on that one. So the bottom one says, well, first, the Halavai got together and nixed this idea of a treaty with the United States. Hey, ke'ehina mua ke'ia no ka ho'ohui aupuni. This is the first step. This is a step towards annexation. So think about that. 1873, Hawaiians at Kaumakapili Church are saying, no, we don't give away Pearl Harbor, because if we do, that's the first step towards annexation. That's prescient, yeah? That's seeing the future. They knew what was going on. Navahi gives a speech in Congress similar to this, where he talks about the loan and so forth and says, these moves by the United States are the first steps towards annexation. So they get together then on a few weeks later, on the 28th of November, and they celebrate the 30th anniversary of La Kuokoa, Hawaiian Independence Day. Friday the 28th of November is the agreed upon day of Hawaiian independence. The government will commemorate the day. We are happy with the program of the day. At 11 a.m., Honorable Z. Poli will give a speech concerning La Kuokoa at Kawaihaʻo Church. In the afternoon at 2 p.m., there will be a luau on the lawn of Pohukaina. Everything starts to connect, yeah? Kauai told us about Pohukaina, the burials there on the grounds at Iolani Palace. So that's where they were meeting to have their luau on La Kuokoa, yeah? To say they are a nation, to claim their independence, to say, no, we don't give away rights to our property. 1885, HBMS Constance, the ship, and other vessels in harbor profusely decorated with bunting. Private citizens flew their flags, government buildings were closed, and very little business was conducted. Procession began at 9 a.m. at the foot of Nu'uanu and Queen Streets. So 1885, you have those folks who had ingratiated themselves with Kalakaua, some of the American businessmen and so forth, starting to make more and more moves towards controlling the government, controlling business and so forth. And Kalakaua has what I like to call a Saul-like moment, a moment where he realizes that those folks who have brought him into power might not need him now. And so he kind of turns 180 degrees and starts to talk about an intense nationality, an intense protection of sovereignty and so forth. And so this battle starts between sons and grandsons of the mission and businessmen and Kalakaua. And you see that borne out in everything that's passed, everything that's kind of fought over and so forth. This is 1885. A year later, at the beginning of 1886, this battle starts to come to a head. The Haole businessmen in town, some of them Hawaiian Kingdom nationals and some of them foreigners, get together and form a secret organization. Dr. McGibbon is an American doctor in town, and they meet at his house. Lauren Thurston, Sanford Dole, and so forth. They start a secret organization called the Hawaiian League. Yeah? And this organization has as its constitution that every member has to pledge to and I don't have the exact words in my head, but the preservation and demand of white rule in the kingdom, right? So they know what they're doing. There's no doubt about what they're doing. They want to see white rule in Hawaii. This is 1886. And they formed a club to do that. Now, they start to gather signatures. Now we've got, not that everyone needs to run down and get this, but we've got the log of all the men who joined at the Hawaii State Archives. So if you're interested in that role, that's there too. But this organization grew in number, but also started to grow in strength by taking on the Hawaiian League. the Honolulu Rifles. Many of you have talked about or heard about the Honolulu Rifles. They're the most aggressive, kind of well-drilled militia in the islands. Now, originally, the Honolulu Rifles was a private organization. They were chartered under Hawaiian Kingdom law as kind of a private militia. Kind of like you think about Blackwater, right? They go and do stuff for the American government. Honolulu Rifles was at the beck and call of the kingdom. So the king could call out the Honolulu Rifles if he needed them to put down a riot or something happening down at the wharf or so forth. The Honolulu Rifles were a private militia under Hawaiian Kingdom law. Well, they come under the control and under they get pili with the Hawaiian League. And that becomes the military wing of the Hawaiian League. So now you have these American businessmen, these white businessmen and Hawaiian Kingdom businessmen starting to push more and more power things, start to control military and so forth. Oops. So that moves into late 1886. November of 1886, there's Kalakaua's 50th Jubilee, his birthday, 50th birthday. Huge celebration going to happen, 2 weeks long, people from all over the islands coming. The guest list is 1,000 names long. They're going to have hula, even though it's not legal. They're going to have song. They're going to have dances, horse races, all kinds of stuff. All the schools and institutions and churches are going to come and march before the king with banners that they've created. Princess Liliuokalani, who's the heir to the throne, has an organization called the Ahahui Ho'ona'oau Liliuokalani, the Liliuokalani Educational Society. She's paying, and her friends that she's gathered money from, are paying the tuition for dozens of Native Hawaiian women and boys to go to schools around the kingdom. Not only Kawaihaʻo Seminary, but others. And so she goes to Kawaihaʻo Seminary, where she has a close tie, and she tells the girls there that she wants them to come as her special guest. So the princess invites you, as a 14-year-old Native Hawaiian girl, the princess invites you to the King's Jubilee as her special guest. And the girls are ecstatic. And they make banners. They start to practice their oli. They start to make new dresses to show up for Kalakaua. The Kawaiahao Seminary has 3 trustees: the Reverend Sereno Edwards Bishop, the Reverend Charles Hyde, and Albert Francis Judd. The Reverend Sereno Bishop goes before the board and says, "No, these girls cannot go. I refuse to let them go. No woman should fall under that heathen's gaze." And he forbids the girls to go. So what are these, we've had these stories about how Christianity brainwashed Hawaiians and docilized them and so forth. So how do these brainwashed, docilized Native Hawaiian young Christian women react to the fact that their board of trustees has said they cannot go? They start a petition to oust those guys as trustees. And they're successful. Yeah? On January 1st, 1887, all 3 of those men, those white men, had to resign their positions from the board because of pressure from these 14, 15, 16-year-old Native Hawaiian girls in school. Yeah? That's agency, right? That's claiming your nation and claiming your independence. But we're starting to see this build up into a fight that's coming to a head. 1887, we know the Bayonet Constitution happens, right? We know that the monarch, the executive branch of power, is kind of watered down quite a bit. We know that the legislature rules have changed. Asians have had the vote since 1852, and now they no longer can vote. So it's the monetary clause to vote has been raised. So you're having a lot of Hawaiians being squeezed out of the vote, and also other non-whites. So we have La Kuokoa, 1889, Palama Oahu. One of the greatest celebrations of La Kuokoa held in many years. 300 to 400 people with the Hawaiian Quintet Club song. So Hawaiians are starting to come together again en masse in reaction to this Bayonet Constitution. They're starting to organize. Just before La Kuokoa, 1889, they formed Hui Kalai Aina, which was the first official Native Hawaiian political party. Hui Kalai Aina was that first group, and their whole purpose was to get rid of or amend the Bayonet Constitution. William White, Joseph Navahi, John Bush, and others were members of that party. And they were pushing, both in the legislature and around town, to get rid of that Bayonet Constitution. We know that Robert Wilcox took up arms, right, and tried to end that Constitution in 1889. But that was unsuccessful. And we start to see, again, this thing coming to a head. That 1889 La Kuokoa, John Bush was the president of Hui Kalai Aina. He was also an editor of Ka'oia'io newspaper, Liliuokalani newspaper, a member of the Privy Council, and the former governor of Kauai. So everyone gets it. Everyone feels that there's a fight over independence going on, that we need to show up. And Bush gives a speech where he says, in part, "Every nation has its day of birth, around which cluster memories that cause the hearts of its people to pulsate with emotions of joy and hope, especially whenever they are gathered together, as on this occasion, to hear reminiscence of their history, recalling to their minds the deeds of valor and of heroism which their ancestors had performed." Like Keanu said, like Kau'i said, they knew back then they needed to remember. And this day did that for them. This day every year was a day to come together and really spend the day thinking about issues of the nation. He goes on to say, "Your liberty has been restricted, your rights limited, your independence challenged. As long as there is one representative of our race alive, may the sentiment of true patriotism and the love of Hawaiian national independence never cease. And let us ever cherish our national motto, Wamau Ke'eo Oka'aina Ikapono." Yeah? They knew what was at stake. The next year, La Kuokoa, 1890, Kona, Big Island. This 28th day of November that we are gathered here and are celebrating together is the most important of all the days that we celebrate as Hawaiians. I reflect on the Hawaiians of the past who venerated this day above all other holidays. But now it seems that remembrance of this day has waned and it's less celebrated than other holidays. Therefore, I am encouraging you, my folks, my dear friends, Hawaiians in blood, flesh, and with ancestral ties to this district of South Kona who have gathered here today, remember this day above all other holidays. Yeah? That was William Hyde Rice speaking to a crowd of Hawaiians at La Kuokoa on that day. So again, a national sentiment, right? Saying, remember your holiday. The next year on 1891, Queen Liliuokalani comes to power. Thomas Square. So Kau'i told you about Laplace. Thomas Square was where Admiral Thomas, the celebration where he returned the nation's sovereignty, right? Thomas Square today is being, I won't say butchered, Thomas Square is being changed today by the county of Honolulu. I'm not going to get off on a political tirade, but I will inform you that the county of Honolulu is turning Thomas Square over to a for-profit but government organization so that they can make that into a corridor towards Kaka'ako. And all those folks buying $7-8 million condos in Kaka'ako will have a park to use and things to buy and so forth. But that's Thomas Square. Okay, put that aside. Thomas Square, 1891, they said, the day's activities are open with prayer by S.C. Ko'opono, and including a bicycle race, a baseball match, a review of the household troops and police force, and speeches by Hui Kalai'aina's president, and several patriots including William Punohu White and Iosepa Navahi. The Royal Hawaiian Band played the national anthem, Hawaiian Pono'i. Honorable D.W. Pua said, "We commemorate this day as the day we got our independence. May our flag continue to wave over this kingdom till the last Hawaiian disappears." Yeah? So again, they're gathering together on this day to say, until the last single Hawaiian disappears, we'll celebrate our independence. So 1893, January 17th, we have the coup d'etat declared by the US president as an act of war. As Keanu's work has shown us, later on that year, towards the end of 1893, there were talks between the United States and the Kingdom of Hawaii about restoration of the Queen. Those talks are going on in December. November, December is when the rumors are coming back. The Blount report has been released to the public in November. And so there's lots and lots of talk about restoration of the Queen. So on La Kuokoa 1893, people are ecstatic. They're celebrating the possible return of the Queen to power. The letter, I don't know which side is on you, out of the newspapers I found that clipping. A jeweler in Honolulu was creating Hawaiian flag badges. Restoration, hip hip hurrah, a large assortment of lovely enameled Hawaiian flag badges. So they were selling restoration badges that would see the Queen come back to power. Yeah? October 18th, the Blount report released. November 13th, Minister Willis meeting with the Queen. November 15th, there's reason to believe that an attack is coming. November 24th, Lauren Thurston says that the Queen will be restored. November 25th, 1,000 haole meet at the drill shed. The executive committee of the provisional government issues rifles and ammo to the guard. Permission rescinded for U.S. ships to land troops in Hawaii, and they sandbagged the palace. Right? Now remember this. When we talk about the U.S., we've got to be very careful. It's a lot more complex than that. Right? When we talk about, I still see published all the time in newspapers and things like that and people's talks that when those American businessmen overthrew the Queen. It's not true. A majority of the gentlemen that were of the 13 were Hawaiian Kingdom subjects. The commonality was that they were white, yeah, but they were Hawaiian Kingdom subjects. Some of them never been to America. Lauren Thurston, Sanford Dole were Hawaiian Kingdom subjects. They weren't Americans. America took part in it through the landing of the U.S. troops. Yeah? And then America has a huge role in the supposed annexation, right? So America is involved in 1893 through their troops and through Minister Stevens and so forth. That plan is to get annexed to the U.S. It doesn't happen because President Cleveland withdraws the treaty. The Blount report says it was an act of war. So now the U.S. says, okay, we're going to put the Queen back. And the provisional government, right, which has become a republic, tells the U.S., hey, this is none of your business but out. This is an internal matter. Because now the U.S. is the enemy. The U.S. wants to bring the Queen back to power, right? So in the midst of that, they have La Kuokoa 1893. And there's a song written in the newspapers called the La Kuokoa Song. And this is an actual mele written to honor Independence Day. Last year at UH Manoa, Native Hawaiian Student Services had Dr. Osorio, John Osorio, and his class put music to the song, to these words. But we don't know the original music. We just have the words. But this is another piece, right? This is another piece that I'm not a musician. I recommend that you folks take. Make it a song. Sing it. Sing it at every La Kuokoa celebration we have. Because your kapuna did, right? This was the La Kuokoa mele, along with a mele written for the Queen that appeared in 1893, that year of the overthrow. So, rule by theft and force, the suppression of the native language, 1896 to 1900. So we have the overthrow, we have the supposed annexation that we know didn't happen, and we have this oligarchy, this small group of men running the kingdom, running the islands, and they've got to make an argument to the U.S. This is right before annexation. They got to make an argument to the U.S. why they should be annexed. I wrote an article for the Hawaiian Journal of History about 6 years ago, that talked about collegiate debates over annexation in the U.S. Again, we can't generalize about the U.S., right? While this was going on, while this push for annexation was going on, many people in the U.S. were against it. Some of the major colleges in the U.S. held college debates over annexation, and in every debate that I found, the no side won. Yeah. Yeah. So, Harvard versus Yale. Georgetown versus Columbia. The first college debate on the west coast of the United States was between the UC schools, which at that time was Berkeley and Hastings Law School, versus Stanford, right? And in every case, no annexation won. And it won for two main reasons. One reason was racist. One reason was we don't want 100,000 brown people coming into our country as citizens. But the other reason was it's not just. We are a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. How can we annex a country that doesn't want to be taken? That's just wrong. These college students were making this argument and winning this argument, right? That's the argument that Hui Aloha Aina takes to the U.S. Congress with the petitions in 1897 and says, we are a nation, right? And they win. They defeat that treaty of annexation. So while all this is going on, these guys have to argue against that. Now, what is the argument against democracy in the U.S.? The only argument they have is a racial one, is to say that Hawaii, yes, man has certain rights, but Hawaiians aren't even men. Now, that's going to be really hard, because in 1863, the ABCFM, the missionaries in Boston, declared Hawaii a Christian nation. That Christian, native-led nation was one of the most progressive nations on earth. And so how do you erase all of that and say, well, they're not even really people? You get rid of the language. Dr. Trask used to always say, this process is millennia old, and it's been done the same way every time. The first step, get rid of the language. Because if you get rid of what they wrote, then you got to read what we wrote. And that's what they did. They started to get rid of the language. The 1896 language law in the Republic, the outlawing of Hawaiian language being used in the territory, and all of these steps. So in 1897-98, the president of the Board of Education, William DeWitt Alexander, puts together a pamphlet that he has previously written, along with a lot of other histories, and he creates a book that's called A Brief History of the Hawaiian People. And this book is published in New York for the Board of Education in Hawaii. And it's a horrific book. It talks about how Hawaiians are evil, how their inherent nature is bad, they have a hard time being men, and so forth. And one of the most egregious examples, I didn't bring it with me today, I usually do. One of the most egregious examples is when William DeWitt Alexander, a historian in the 19th century, writes about what he calls infanticide. Now, many of you have heard of the myth of infanticide, right? Killing your own children. Yeah, that's what infanticide is. Rumors started, and who's the guy that wrote Michener? Michener wrote about infanticide and so forth. Dr. David Stannard, Dr. Hanani K. Trask's partner, wrote a book disproving the myth of infanticide in Hawaii. Nonetheless, in 1897, 98, 99, William DeWitt Alexander writes about infanticide in Hawaii, and he says in his book, it's by those best informed, it is thought that 2/3 of Hawaiian children were killed in infancy by their parents, buried alive in their yards. And the reason for this is because of their laziness to raise children. So he says 2/3 of native Hawaiian children were buried alive in their front yards because Hawaiians are too lazy to raise kids. Now we know that not to be true. That's horrific. But that becomes written in English in a textbook. That book that he writes becomes a textbook. He's the president of the Board of Education. It becomes the school textbook for all schools in the territory of Hawaii from 1899 to 1940. So for 40 years in the territory of Hawaii, your kapuna, when they went to school, their school history book told them that about their ancestors, that they buried their kids alive in the front yard. That's how you get rid of a narrative. That's how you erase Native voice. That's how you start to claim that Hawaiians need to be taken care of by another nation. And we don't know that other glorious past because, again, it's Makolala Hawaii, it's in Hawaiian. So that's one example. There's dozens and dozens and hundreds of examples of that type of rhetoric that comes out about Hawaiians not being achieving and so forth. So here's his book, A Brief History of the Hawaiian People, published by order of the Board of Education of the Hawaiian Islands. It's very necessary to have a work of this kind in the hands of the higher classes in our schools. It's a standard authority in school textbook for more than 40 years. That book became the textbook in all territorial schools in Hawaii. It also became the school textbook at the University of Stanford. Yeah? So at the U.S. colleges, the top colleges in the U.S., that's what they're reading about Native Hawaiians in the 19-teens and 20s and 30s and 40s. That's how you create an identity for Hawaiians that's vastly different from their real identity. And that's how you eventually get them to believe their own identity. You keep telling them that, and you erase them from the voices of their ancestors. Another thing, 1895, Bishop Museum had just recently put in Hawaiian Hall. The first hall they had was the front corridor that they called Polynesian Hall. They had just built Hawaiian Hall as this great, huge, beautiful exhibition of a museum, the best museum in the Pacific. And they're looking for stuff to put in it. In 1895, a gentleman named Joe Oku'u from Wailuku, Maui, passes away. He was a member of Kalakaua Halinau'a. His son is training to become a Christian pastor in Honolulu. There was a school in Honolulu called Kulakuhunapuli Okapakapika Akau, the North Pacific Missionary Institute. And that's where about 90% of the native pastors went when they went into churches across the islands. So he's a student there, Joe's son. So he goes back to collect his father's things, and he collects all his feather works and his halinau'a stuff. He doesn't know what to do with it, so he goes to Charles Hyde, who's in charge of the principal of the school. He says, "What should I do with this stuff?" Charles Hyde is a trustee of the Bishop Museum. So Charles Hyde brings this stuff over to the museum, and they create an exhibit at Bishop Museum that's got nothing to do with anthropology or telling the story of the future Hawaiians. It's a political exhibit. He puts the things on exhibit in the main part of Hawaii Hall with a card that says, "Articles and Artifacts Used in Praying for the Restoration of the Queen, 1895. So he's saying all those Hawaiians who are for the Queen and trying to bring the Queen back, this is how they are. He takes the artifacts, he lays them out, he puts a bottle of gin and a bottle of rum in the exhibit with them, along with the shark-tooth daggers and so forth, to make it kind of really exotic. And he doesn't tell the story of where it came from. He says a family got scared out of their heathen, father's ways and brought this stuff to us. Not true. But I'll show you that exhibit that ran at Bishop Museum from 1895 till at least 1902. Articles and Artifacts Used in Praying for the Restoration of the Queen, 1895. That's how you create an institutional narrative about Hawaiians being heathen in 1895. You go look at the logbook, all the schools were being brought there on purpose. All the students from the Pakipika Akau were brought there on purpose. Anybody coming into town was brought to the museum, right? And that exhibit tells them about what Hawaiians supposedly are. Now, and I want to step back a moment to talk about that idea of identity and self-identity. It's one thing to have people think something of you, but the real key to this mind control is to get people to think that about themselves. My hero throughout I was born in 1966, and throughout my college years, it was Nelson Mandela, because he was in prison. And all of us knew what he had given, 26 years of his life in prison. And he was my hero. And I thought, wow, there is a black man that knows his worth. If anybody knows how ridiculous race theory is, it's him. He knows who he is, he saw who he is. And I'm reading his autobiography, Nelson Mandela's autobiography. And there's a part in there where he was talking about when he was undercover. and they were part of the ANC, and they were blowing up telephone poles and things like that, causing trouble. And he lands in a plane, they're hiding out, he lands in a plane in Botswana. And he's going to switch planes to another plane. And Nelson Mandela gets out of the plane, and he goes to get in the other plane, and he says, I went to go get in the other plane, and I looked, and the pilot was black. And I thought, oh my God, does he know how to fly? You know? And that idea of Nelson Mandela wondering if a black man can fly a plane, that's how you start to get a people to self-identify as less than, as not capable, yeah? So that's the type of narrative they used. By the 1940s and 50s, what was it? You folks know, that in the 1940s and 50s, what was it to be Hawaiian? Yeah? To be slow, to be behind, to be lazy, That's what the narrative was. When I was I used to live in Palolo with a woman named Charlene Nobriga. I was a graduate student, had my daughter, I was a single dad, and we were living in a tiny little room. And Mrs. Nobriga was half Hawaiian, half Portuguese. And her parents spoke fluent Hawaiian, both her parents, and she didn't speak a word. She told me when I walked in the kitchen, they stopped speaking Hawaiian. Learn English, yeah? Get a job, do good in school. And so she got a real kick out of the fact this haole kid in her house was learning Hawaiian and learning Hawaiian stuff. So every night we'd come home and what'd you learn today? And we'd talk about stuff. And one day I invited her to my friend's graduation. He was getting his PhD. His name is Kimo Armitage, PhD in English literature. Brilliant man. He's written 17, 20 different books. Brilliant man. We were having a luau at the Center for Hawaiian Studies for Kimo. And I said, Auntie, come down. You can meet Kimo, and we're having this luau, and it'd be fun. So she came down to school with me. And wonderful woman, half Portuguese, half Hawaiian. And we get there, and she meets everybody, and she meets Kimo, and Kimo's very fair-skinned, probably lighter-skinned than I am. And so she pulls me aside later. She said, oh, smart, that haole boy. I said, oh, no, Auntie, he's not haole, he's Hawaiian. He's Hawaiian? Get a PhD. You know, and she was serious. She wasn't joking around. Like, to her, it really boggled her mind that a Hawaiian got a PhD. Wow, he must be the exception, right? He must be the guy that got through. So that's because she grew up in that time period, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, hearing what a Hawaiian was, right? We know much different. I'm going to share with you in a bit some of that true narrative about what it meant to be Hawaiian. So we have that Bishop Museum Pauahi exhibit, 1895. We have all of this stuff building up. In 1900, so the gentleman who had claimed the annexation had been pushing for 5 years. They finally pretend like it happened, right? August 12th, 1898. That night at Iolani Palace, they have a grand ball celebrating the supposed annexation. Dole, Thurston, the U.S. military, everybody goes to the palace. And they have a ball till 4 in the morning. And 3, 4 in the morning, they go home, drunk, go to sleep. And I like to think they woke up in the morning and said, holy shit, what do we do? Because the U.S. is democratic, right? If Hawaii becomes democratic, they're greatly outnumbered. As an oligarchy, they ran things, right? A few guys ran the whole country because they didn't spread out power. Now there's a chance Hawaiians are going to get the vote back. The first time since 1893. Not that it's a good thing, but it's going to be a challenge to their power, right? So they push for Hawaiians not to have the vote. Awful racist columns written in the newspapers everywhere. Hawaiians don't deserve the vote, Sereno Bishop writes a column, and he says, if you want Hawaiians to vote for annexation, then have us missionaries vote for annexation, because they're not even human. Yeah? So, but the commission, the Organic Acts, the commission that put together the Organic Acts passes universal suffrage. Not universal suffrage. Asians still weren't allowed to vote. But passes suffrage. So now the haole are greatly outnumbered. And sure enough, in the matter of about 4 months, Hawaiians gather together. Hui Aloha Aina, Hui Kalai Aina come together. They merge and form a political party called Ke Ao Okoa Home Rula, the Hawaiian Home Rule Party. And in the matter of 4 to 5 months, they canvass the islands. They're going up against the white oligarchy, Republican Party, and they put together a political party, organize, pull out votes, and they defeat and they win that election. Yeah? By a far majority, they win the legislative election. Now remember, the oligarchy is still going to have much of the power because the executive is appointed. The President of the United States appoints the governor of Hawaii. The judiciary is appointed by the governor. So now you've got legislative power. So Hawaiians win the legislature. They go into the legislature. Now, another key note, women. Democratic Party, women weren't anywhere near the rallies and the organization and so forth. Republican Party, no way. The Kuokoʻa Home Rula, the Home Rule Party, had women delegates to its constitutional convention. They helped write the constitution for the party. They helped organize the party. They were giving speeches from the stump, political speeches. There's one woman, Kalua Palawa Kama, in Laie that I've been tracking. She was the head of the Relief Society in Laie. She's in charge of the Home Rule Party out in that area, right? Wilcox wins the election. He's the first senator to the United States. The Home Rule Party wins. They come into power. They spend 6 weeks canvassing the islands, asking the people what they want. They put together petitions. They put together demands. They visit all the bureaus they haven't been in because they haven't been in power in a long time. They go to the police station. They go to the insane asylum. They go to the hospitals. What needs to be done? And they come together with a plan to rule. And importantly, they don't just pass things that are going to help Hawaiians. Like, if you look at the record, I'm not anti-Haole. I'd be in trouble. But the oligarchy was passing things to help themselves. When Hawaiians come into power, one of the first bills they pass is a bill to give aid to those Chinese who have lost their homes in the Chinatown fire. They didn't have to do that. The Chinese didn't have any vote. They didn't have any power. But they passed a bill to help the Chinese. They also pass a bill taking all the tax off of any implements, land, or anything used to grow taro. So if you grow taro, no taxes. They pass a bill bringing Hawaiian language back into the schools and mandating the schools be bilingual. They pass a school creating counties of Hawaii that are going to take power away from the governor by decentralizing power. And they name the counties after their ali'i. Yeah? They pass all these bills to help Hawaiians and help others around the kingdom, right? And so they get a whole bunch done. Problem is, Governor Dole vetoes every bill they pass. Yeah? And so they're one vote short of a 2/3 override. So Hawaiians organize, plan, adapt, and push and pass bills and they only had 60 days as opposed to normal 90 days. So amazing feat that these leaders did, yet none of that goes into the record. There's only 2 pieces written about, well, I wrote one recently, but before that there was only 2 pieces written about that legislature, the first territorial legislature in 1901. One was by Ernest Andrade and one was by Gavin Dawes. And they both call it a joke. Nothing got done. See what happens when you let Hawaiians have power. They didn't do anything. They sat around and argued about stuff. Nothing happened. No, that's not what happened. They passed 73 bills, and most of them were vetoed and so forth. But again, what was Dawes looking at? What was Ernest Andrade looking at? They're looking at those Haole papers. And I'll show you what those Haole papers said. So that territorial legislature that was run by Native Hawaiians, the Kanu people Kuokoa put a front page out, dressed in top hats, and they said, the 2 American observers that were there said it was one of the best decorum they'd seen in a legislative body. But the English papers say this. This is the front page of the Hawaiian Gazette, 1901. A Banderlog legislature, and they show the legislature as literally monkeys in the jungle. And printed underneath the caption is The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, right? That's what they're saying about these doctors, lawyers, judges, traditional medicine folks. In the Pacific Commercial Advertiser, at the close of the legislature, they pass a cartoon saying the circus leaves town with Hawaiian legislators as monkeys. The Hawaiian simian circus headed out to the woods. That's the narrative that was created about Hawaiians, despite everything that was happening. That's why, if you don't access those Hawaiian language things, you start to get that record into the 1920s and 30s. So, I want to talk about memory, and I want to talk about remembrance, and I want to talk about the physical and the mental landscape. Yeah, the physical landscape. What you see out there, right? What you see out there. The mental landscape, what you tell, the stories you tell, like the story Kau'i said today, right? The story she tells her kids, the story I tell my daughter. That's a mental landscape. We can tell, we can somewhat control that landscape. Not all. They go to school, they hear other things, but we can add to that landscape. The physical landscape we can change too. As we all sit around, I feel I feel helpless many, many times. What can I do? All I'm doing is telling stories. We can do lots of things. We can affect the landscape in this gym. We can affect the landscape in our school. We can affect the landscape in our house. Do we all have Hawaiian Kingdom flags in our house? Do we all have something at the corner of our street? Do we all ask the coffee shop, the local coffee shop, the nice guy who runs it, do we ask him if we can put up a Hawaiian flag or something? We can change that landscape, that physical landscape, and it makes a difference. They know that. That's why they did it. Yeah? So let's look at what they did. So how do they honor their heroes? How does America honor their heroes? Abraham Lincoln has the Lincoln Memorial. I've never seen it in person. Kau'i, have you seen it? Yeah? Yeah? Huge, right? Massive. That's their hero. That's a guy that's, I'm not saying, maybe he is, I don't know. That's their hero, right? Where are those statues of Hawaiian heroes? We have a statue of Robert Wilcox downtown. We have a statue of Duke, right? Where are things like that? Where's the honoring of Hawaiian heroes? They put up statues like that. they not only do it there, they start to do it here. They're not stupid. They're following a process they know works, creating a monumental landscape. Here in Hawaii, they changed the name, as Keanu mentioned, they changed the name in 1907 of Honolulu High School to McKinley High School. In 1907, Honolulu High School's name was changed to President William McKinley High School after U.S. President William McKinley, whose influence helped bring about the annexation of the Hawaiian Islands to the United States. 40-foot bronze statue of President McKinley on the front lawn. It must be the biggest statue in Hawaii, yeah? 40 feet? That's claiming landscape, right? Now, I mentioned earlier the schools. If you sit down and actually look through the DOE list, it's crazy. President Abraham Lincoln Elementary School in Makiki. President Thomas Jefferson Elementary. President Theodore Roosevelt High. President George Washington Middle School. This is in Hawaii. President William McKinley Community School. President William McKinley High School. Admiral Arthur W. Radford High. Admiral Chester Nimitz Elementary, Lieutenant Colonel Horace Meek Hickam Elementary, Major General William Shafter Elementary, Major Sheldon Wheeler Elementary, Major Sheldon Wheeler Middle School, Major John Wilson Elementary, Sergeant Samuel K. Solomon Elementary, Robert Louis Stevenson Middle School, William P. Jarrett Middle School, and on and on and on. 2,000 miles from the coast of the United States. I have no problem with these gentlemen. They might be great men. I don't know. But why are they being honored in Hawaii when Hawaiian heroes are not? Yeah? That's claiming landscape, right? That's claiming landscape. Queen Liliuokalani School on Waialae Avenue in where is it? Kaimuki was shut down, right? No more that one either. So that, again, the physical landscape of Hawaii. President Abraham Lincoln School, 2016, February 12th. Eva Elementary School celebrates its 72nd annual Lincoln Day program. Second graders perform I Want to Be Just Like You for hundreds of proud parents, teachers, and students. Right? At Eva High School, at Eva Elementary School. 72 years they've been honoring President Abraham Lincoln at the school and saying, I want to be just like you. Right? Where's the Navahi? Where's the Ha'alilio? Where's the William White? Where's the I want to be just like you coming out of Hawaiian kids' mouths about those folks? I mentioned earlier that the grave of William White, it was literally, the very, very, very short story is I met a kupuna who knew where it was, and he took me there and showed me. And to be completely honest, I can't say I 100% believed him at first. You know, okay, uncle, you know, I found from the map from the Ka'ahumana Society, and that's where he lies. Yeah. So William Punahou White, the man who wrote one of the authors of the Constitution, the man who got the Knights Order of Kalakaua, senator from Lahaina, was in an unmarked grave under a heap of grass. Yet we have a 72nd annual Abraham Lincoln Day in Hawaii, right? Hui Kalai Aina, Hui Aloha Aina, David Kuʻokoʻa, one of the great patriots of the Hawaiian nation. Have you guys been to his grave? We have remember the Abraham Lincoln Memorial? This is Kuʻokoʻa's grave, one of the greatest Hawaiian heroes. That's it at the bottom of the arrow, yeah? I did kick aside a couple beer cans that was over by the shelf. But that's Pueo Cemetery. That's on School Street, right, in Kalihi. That's one of the greatest heroes in Hawaiian history. Right? So that's and I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying that's how it's done, right? That's claiming landscape. That's how you set aside a nation or build up a nation. Now, the good news. La Kuokoa. I want to be really clear. I just chose the ones I could get to. There's lots and lots and lots of celebrations I don't know about. This isn't the history of La Kuokoa celebrations, but it's the ones I could access, the ones I know about. And so I don't mean to diss Hilo, but a lot of these are UH Manoa. But they were out there. People were celebrating it a lot. But the first one I heard about was in 2007. And the guy in the yellow right there in the middle of the picture, that's him right back there. Kalani Akea, raise your hand. Woo! Right? Kalani Akea and his haumana and our Kumu Terry Kanalu Young, held the first La Kuokoa celebration at UH Manoa, right, in 2007. And you see that was the crowd, right? Yeah? Where'd that come out of? Okay, Bachman Hall, right. So that was a celebration in 2007 that Kumu Kanalu and Kalani Akea and those folks said, we're going to remember, right? 2009, Hui Aloha Tuahine at UH Manoa, educational speakers, Ahuhuila au lapa'au, makahiki games. So it's growing, yeah? Get games, get food, get celebration, things like that. 2009. 2011, Makavalu, yeah? Another homestead poi, historic speech reenactments. Historic speech reenactments, right? That's remembering. That's remembering. Have you ever seen Lynette Cruz's group, Clay Miley Ali, do their thing? You can't forget that, right? You remember those names. Abigail Campbell, I remember that name. So those reenactments help. Hawaiians are starting to do that. They're remembering. They haven't forgotten. 2012, La Kuokoa, 5th anniversary of the rebirth. Aloha Aina concert. Skippy Ioane, Happy Independence Day, music, food, again put on by Makavalu. 2014, we have one on Big Island. We have one Ukimahame. We have one at Ko'olauloa. We have one on Kauai and Ni'ihau. We have one in Manoa. We have one in Waimanalu. And this one I really love, a celebration of La Kuokoa in Brooklyn, New York. Yeah? 2014, they had a celebration of La Kuokoa in Brooklyn, New York. That's it right there. That's the flyer, right? This year, I know for a fact, Keone guys are doing it in Vegas, right? Celebrations in Vegas. Again, I don't mean to belabor the point. That's claiming landscape, right? Landscape on their nation, right? It's claiming landscape, saying we're here and we remember. La Kuokoa 2015, Hana Maui, Manoa, Lahaina, Kaimu, Manoa, Pu'ukohola, Kona, Honolulu, right? These things are growing, yeah? These things are growing. Education is happening. People are remembering. People are telling stories. 2016, Waimanalo, Upcountry Maui, Hawaii Community College, Hamakua, Iolani Palace, right? Growing, 2016. This year, Honolulu, Ma'alaya, Hilo, Kona, Upcountry Maui, Anahola, I missed the H, UH Hilo, there's Hilo, yeah? But more and more and more of these. And again, as I said, there's lots of them going on in private homes, there's lots of them going on in neighborhoods, things like that. It does make a difference. It does make a difference. It's claiming space in that time. People who see you, it's claiming space in that mental landscape. So, as Kauai introduced us to Pohukaina earlier, and then I mentioned it again, they had a La Kuokoa celebration there, right? They had a big luau at the burial grounds at the Iolani Palace in 1873. Well, that ties into folks who are taking care of it today, right? Lynette Cruz's guys, Huiloha Aina and Lynette Cruz's folks, they take care of that burial area. I see them out there. She posts every few weeks. They're out there pulling weeds, taking care of the tea leaf, and so forth. That's remembering. That's connecting, right? That's claiming space. The other one was at Thomas Square. Remember they had a celebration of La Kuokoa at Thomas Square? They're doing it more now too, yeah? 2016, this is La Ho'io'ea, but again, remembering independence. Claiming space on the physical landscape also means something. Now, I'm not recommending you get arrested for graffiti. But when I was in Hilo, I gave a talk about 2 or 3 weeks ago at UH Hilo, and I had a couple of hours off, and so I had a car, I came down to town, I was walking around, just checking out town. Everything's closed on Sunday, which is really weird. I'm like, Sunday's the day off, but the library was closed. So I was walking around, and I came across this, downtown Hilo. Yeah? Somebody spray painted Kalakawa's face on the county electricity thing, right? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Now, again, I didn't tell you to go spray paint the town. But my point is, that's claiming space. I was like, that made me happy, right? What about the other 1,000 people who saw it? Yeah, what about somebody who saw it skateboarding by and said, oh, who's that? And his friend tells him, right? That's claiming space. Now, I can't mention claiming space without mentioning my kumu, who I think, and I mahalo all of my kumu. Dr. John, Liliuokalani, all of Kuokoa, all of my kumu. But for me, the person who claimed space, before people were claiming space, was Dr. Haunani K. Trask, yeah? Yeah. So, that's her picture from 1993, right? That's her, claiming a space, claiming a voice. I'll show that to people nowadays, and they're taken aback. You guys, I wasn't here. You folks that were there in 1993, like, that was a big thing, yeah? I am not American. I am not American. I am not American. She was saying that, how many years ago is it? 24 years ago. A quarter of a century ago, Haunani K. was saying that, right? She was claiming space. She claimed space at UH Manoa. I know that from personal example. She got her students to claim space and changed the name of Porteous Hall, right? She claimed space and claimed mental landscapes by having her students take over student government, right? So that type of person, that type of people claiming space comes from that genealogy of the ancestors, right? That's carrying on that tradition, that's remembering. Okay, we're finishing up here. Claiming space on the mental landscape, again, I want to say, us academics can be kind of picky about who you mentioned and who you didn't mention. So many kumu are doing this. I was doing this 2 hours ago. So these are some of the many folks that are claiming landscape in the academic world, right? And claiming that mental landscape. Donovan Preza, who's right over here. Yeah, Donovan, raise your hand. Yeah. Dr. Keanu Sai is back there. Donovan's in geography. Who would have thought geography, right? Dr. Tai Tengan in anthropology. Anthropology was not Haunani K's favorite topic, right? So, I have to tell you a quick story about what she said one time. So she said, I have to remember it. She said, anthropologists, are you effing kidding me? She said, if an anthropologist found a bug that could talk, it would write a 60-page paper about how it talked and how it moved its leg and when it moved its leg and how often it talked and whether it talked this way or that way. It wouldn't listen to the fucking bug. You know? So, but that said, Tai said that awful field of anthropology I'm going to go into and change. And he had the guts and everything to go into anthropology. I'm going to do it in our way. Right? So Tai Tengan did that. Dr. Noi Silva, one of my mentors in political science. Myself in history, right? The stuff that I write academically that goes out. And I'll tell you recently, and as Kau'i knows, it's hard to talk about yourself. I do this because I want you to know it exists and I want you to have access to it. My dissertation is on the native Christian churches of the 19th century and how Christianity did not brainwash Hawaiians, but rather was a center of resistance against annexation and for the kingdom. And there's a Oxford University Press is one of the great academic presses of the world. They put out an encyclopedia every 10 years on everything. And they've created a new one. It's a print encyclopedia, but also a digital one. And so they're creating basically an academic Wikipedia. So you can go there and search stuff, and everything up there has been peer reviewed by at least 3 other scholars. And so it's by some of the best scholars around. And they're creating this in different topics. Now, the problem is it's a subscription. So they sell it to universities for a lot of money. So you got to be part of a university to get it. But the hardback book is available. And also, if you ask me, I'd be happy to send it to you. I'm not supposed to, but my point is that they asked me to write the article on the Christian mission in Hawaii. So it was a 10,000-word essay on Christianity in Hawaii that I just finished up and they published last month, and it's part of that encyclopedia. Now, why that's important is because that's where all those other scholars go to find out about Christianity in Hawaii. So all those folks that I've been yelling at for 20 years in Harvard and Yale and so forth, when they start to think about or write about Hawaiian history, they have to go to that article to find out about Hawaiian Christianity. That's changing the academic landscape. That's what we have to start doing is not only, and writing for the public is just as important. Writing for the community is more important, I would say. But we can't forget those other fields too. Claim all those landscapes, okay? Dr. Maria Lohalani Brown. Dr. Lohalani Brown, yeah, Dr. Brown, and I'll say that, I've said this many times and I'll say it again. She recently published a book on John Papa'i'i. And I think it's one of the most important books published in the last 30 years. Dr. Brown voluminously went through the Hawaiian language and the English language records. Yeah? She went through thousands of pages of Privy Council minutes. She went through maybe tens of thousands of Hawaiian language newspaper pages. And she wrote the story of John Papa'i'i. Not a hagiography, not the best story, but she wrote a story of John Papa'i'i. In my mind, it's a model for how to do Hawaiian biographies. I really recommend it. It's Facing the Spears of Change, John Papa'i'i by Dr. Maria Lohalani Brown. She's working on Mo'osh, but she's a professor of religion at UH. So geography, political science, history, religion, anthropology. Well, she just left. Where'd she go? Kau'i was here, but Kau'i and Puakea Nogelmeyer. Let's give them a round of applause. Talk about academic and public history publications. You know, the Avaia Ulu and the things they're doing, right? Changing the landscape, claiming the landscape. Dr. Noelani Ka'opua Goodyear, political science, and Dr. Liliuokalani Lahiva. Yeah? So again, these are a few. This is the reason we have to be hopeful. This is the reason we have to jump on board and participate. There are dozens and dozens of them and hundreds of native Hawaiian graduate students and undergraduate students. If you want to be excited, go hang out at one of the student lounges where Hawaiians hang out and stuff like that. The stuff they're working on, I had students this summer, I ran the Lahui Hawaii Research Center, and I had students this summer that were working on projects that blew me away, from fish ponds to rain to one Hawaiian woman was doing dentistry in ancient Hawaii, you know? So, but the things they're looking at through the Hawaiian language papers and English press really excites me, okay? So all of that is out there. So, my point on La Kuokoa, A Nation Forgets, I want to finish up by telling you something that I wrote just here to kind of get you excited about how we leave. So people will ask, you know, what do I do? How do I change things? The story that Kau'i gave us of Timoteo Ha'lilio. These cards about William White, please take one. Yeah, please take more than one. Give them to your friends. Give them to your family. Tell your school teachers about them. You know, one method is to go to the DOE meeting and lock the front doors and scream at them and don't let them out. And I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but in my experience, that doesn't usually work. In my experience, and you know, there needs to be a path of the hammer and there needs to be a path of the whatever, dove, right? But in my experience, what you can do is go talk to your teacher. Go talk to your kid's teacher. You know, say, hey, you know what? I got this stuff I really would think would be helpful in class. What do you think? You know? We start to access classes. We start to change things. The DOE is changing. This last year, I was a content expert for Hawaiian history for the DOE, and they're creating a new standard. So they're getting rid of Common Core, because they had that for a whole 10 years. And now they're creating C3, this new one called C3. And there was, the sad part about it is there's 40 teachers in the room, and there's one Hawaiian and me, right? So there need to be a lot more Hawaiians in those rooms. But other than that, some of the folks there did listen and wanted to listen. We were looking at the 4th grade curriculum. 4th, 7th, and 9th grade is when they're taught Hawaiian history. My first question was, why only in those grades? And they said, well, because they have to learn American history. And instead of saying why, I said, well, they can learn American history through Hawaii. You can talk about the Civil War through Hawaiian sugar and things like that. You can incorporate Hawaii. But they didn't buy that. But in the 4th grade, they were talking about the birth of the islands. And right now in the 4th grade, they teach them volcanism, how the volcanoes come up and how islands are birthed and so forth. And so the other woman and I said, well, what about Papa and Wakea? They said, oh, no, that's literature. No, that's the birth of the islands. And they listened, and they wrote curriculum, and we got to edit it and so forth, and that made it into the curriculum Common Core. So that'll be part of the 4th grade DOE education moving forward, is the story of Papa and Wakea in every 4th grade public school. So those things do work. You know, the accessing them, claiming those sites does work. So I promised I'd finish up, and I'm going to right here. Okay. So more than a century ago, Urukupuna founded, developed, and led one of the most progressive, thoughtful, and just nations on earth. Okay? Now, I want to pull this up. I'm going to ask you to play along with me for something here. We've talked a lot about the narrative that erased the past. We've talked a lot about celebrations of La Kuokoa. But what is at the core of what Lahui Hawaii was, right? I'm going to take 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and read to you some historical facts. Not my opinion, but some historical facts about the Kingdom of Hawaii. And I want you to do me a favor while I read them. I'm not being all seancey. I'm not Christian or anything, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, yeah, for 2 minutes. Because I want you to listen to these facts of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and I want you to take them in, yeah? I want you to feel them and know what it meant and what it means, right, to be Kanaka Maoli. So these are simple facts that the average American, that I would argue the average Hawaiian doesn't know about Hawaiian history. Many of you do know. But I'm hoping you'll listen, spend 2 minutes, kind of and revel in who you are, revel in who the nation is. Okay? So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for 2 minutes. I'm going to read these to you. In 1840, Mo'i Kauikeoli voluntarily cedes absolute rule for the benefit of his people and the nation. In 1852, Mo'i Kauikeaoli and the kingdom legislature declared universal manhood suffrage, regardless of race, for the nation as part of the Kumukanawai of 1852. That's a decade prior to the fighting of the Civil War in America over slavery. While America was fighting about whether or not to own black people, African Americans, Africans, Spanish, Germans, people of all races could come to the Kingdom of Hawaii, vote, own property, and decide elections. That's a progressive modern nation. In 1859, Mo'i Wahine Emma and Mo'i Alexander Liho Liho raised funds to found a modern hospital to address mass death from disease. In 1860, a near fully literate population, one of the most literate nations in the world. The approximate literacy rate in the United States was 74%. In Hawaii, it was somewhere around 90%. That's a native-led nation. In 1880, the first monarch to circumnavigate the globe was King David Kalakaua, a Hawaiian. The first monarch to install electricity at the State House was Kalakaua in Iolani Palace. He had traveled around the world, met with 60 different world leaders, and in Paris, France, saw an outdoor exhibit of electricity by Edison. He traveled back home through New York and told Edison that he wanted electricity in his nation, and it was done before electricity was installed at the White House. In 1887, the Hawaiian Kingdom had nearly 100 Hawaiian Kingdom consulates and embassies across the world. In 1890, Hui Kalai Aina proposed women's suffrage as part of the amendment to the Constitution. Under U.S. rule, women wouldn't get the vote for another 31 years. Your Kapuna were wise, they were progressive, they ran a brilliant nation. My point, don't forget that. Mahalo.
Okay, we're just going to take a short break, like 2 or 3 minutes, so that we can get Keanu and Kaui up here, and then we'll do a whole question and answer session. Okay, so short break.